Okay, going live. Going live. Okay. All right. Greetings. Welcome to Dorsey's Resource. Well, I'm getting used to this new setting. The topic of this video is going to be Q&A session. What they're not telling you about. I want to go over some things dealing with the Democratic Party. I have some notes with me I want to read from. I'm on a time restraint too, by the way, so just bear with me. If you see me looking up, I'm going to be reading from some notes. I also have not only a website up, but some other personal notes. Something I want to talk about that's been on my mind with a lot of the events going on around the country. I wanted to briefly discuss. I'm not sure. I'm getting used to this new setting, by the way. It's been a while since I've done a video at my place. One of the things I want to touch on, but first, as usual, this video is going to be for educational, entertainment purposes only. Please understand everyone's individual circumstance or situation may be different. It's up to every individual competent person to please do his or her own homework and research regarding the matter being discussed. This information is not to be construed as legal advice. In the event you feel you need to seek a competent professional, it is encouraged that you do so at one's own leisure. Dorsey's Resource Channel is not liable or responsible for any misuse of the information being discussed. These are simply my opinions on the topic. Also, everyone is responsible for their own affairs. Please govern yourselves accordingly. All rights are reserved. This is also Q&A. I see Darren Jackson has jumped in the chat. Greetings to you, Darren. Thank you for joining. By the way, appreciate you. So some of the things in light of what a lot of what's going on, many Black people switched over from the Democratic Party. I was told doing some research because JFK reached out to the Black community and Black people. By the way, not only JFK, but also his brother Robert. By the way, there's actually a photo some years ago that I saw where he went down south, by the way, and there's a reason. So a lot of things they're not telling you about historic wise. I'm going to go over. By the way, I have a lot of notes with me. Once again, this is also Q&A, so don't hesitate. If you all also have any questions on the side, any comments, concerns, or anything you want to address, just jump right in. I will get to the chat. Hopefully, I can try to squeeze everything in. But to jump right into meat potatoes, reading from in 1857, the Supreme Court, with 7 of the 9 justices being Democrat, decided that Dred Scott was not a citizen but property. By the way, you also have, you can look this case up in the Black's Law Dictionary, which I have. Just bear with me for a second. I'll show you guys. And this dictionary right here, by the way, is you can look up the Dred Scott case about it. It was never overturned, by the way. So Black people, melanated people in this country actually have a dual status, which gets into real heavy, sensitive things pertaining to people who are into status correction or redemption education. That's where this links up. But I mainly wanted this video for the time being, to be about, other than the Q&A, the real history, which are not being told about the Democratic Party. And I'm going to even talk about the Black codes, by the way, that's coming up real soon, because there's a misconception about that. You wonder which party actually came up and created the Black codes, by the way. So reading this once again, the Supreme Court, 7 out of 9 of the justices were Democrat. In 1857, they decided that Dred Scott was not a citizen but property. Chief Justice Roger Taney, appointed by Democrat President Andrew Jackson, referenced in his decision that slaves were so far inferior that the Negro, what I'm reading from, it says, might just justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for their own benefit. So Democrats, you're going to see, they tried to keep Black people, people of color, enslaved, by the way, historically. And you wonder, there's people that argue there was things that changed to a degree, slight variations in the 60s when the majority of the Black community did switch over to voting Democrat. But the problem is that a lot of the history, the true history, is not being told. You know, you won't hear this from the mainstream media. People out there like Roland Martin, who else? Michael Eric Dyson won't talk about this. By the way, who else? Al Sharpton. He addressed it at one time and just tried to brush it off. But there's certain things they won't go into. It was the Republicans were the abolitionists that actually fought to end slavery. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican, by the way, in case many of you all don't know. And I want to say on a side note, I have no political affiliation to any particular party. I've mentioned that before numerous times, but I think the history is important. I used to have some people I didn't understand when I was younger approach me some years ago about this, like they were trying to convert me. And I was a Democrat at the time before I terminated my voter registration. And that's a whole separate video. If you guys want to know, just let me know. I can go into the reasons. I have good reasons. I attended a private event some years ago with members of the ruling class elite. So I'm in a different category. I'm not in the same category as everybody else. So understand that. And there's also benefits, other ways that individuals who are in my position do contribute to the economy, even from the private sector. And I gave that example in a previous video when the city ran out of money, how they got a donation, big donation from someone in the private sector, by the way, when they couldn't afford paramedic vehicles, by the way. So that gets into another topic that's very meticulous, but to stay on the subject, after the Civil War, Republicans pushed through the 13th Amendment, adopted December 6, 1865, officially abolishing slavery in America. This was the Republican Party. This wasn't the Democrats. Once Southern Democrats were forced to free their slaves, they attempted to effectively re-enslave them by passing black codes and Jim Crow laws, which required former slaves to be apprenticed to employers and punish those who left. So let me go over that again. There's this misconception about the black codes, by the way. Once Southern Democrats were forced to free their slaves, they attempted to effectively re-enslave them by passing the black codes and Jim Crow laws, which required former slaves to be apprenticed to employers and punish those who left. Once again, this was the Democratic Party. Another thing, the Democratic Party started the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. By the way, it was members of the Democratic Party that organized and started the Ku Klux Klan. And from what I just read, it was also the Democratic Party that voted for the Jim Crow laws, where black people couldn't use certain restrooms, bathrooms, water fountains, things of that sort, melanated people during this time period. By the way, this is not oftentimes told in Black history. You won't hear this from a lot of modern day Black nationalists. They won't share this side of the story. Also, Republicans started a lot of the Black HSBCUs, such as Morehouse, Spelman, and I'll get to that later if I have time, by the way. But to delve into the Jim Crow laws, by the way, and I'll get to the chat section in case any of you guys jumped in. I can't see the chat window, by the way. I'm reading from this other screen, but this is part 2 of this book I've gone over. It's called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. And a good friend of mine told me this is no longer in print, or they tried to ban it from Amazon. So I recommend, if you can still find it on eBay, Amazon, or any sites, this is part 1. This deals with the transatlantic slave trade. This book right here, this is part 1, deals with the transatlantic slave trade, and it shows the names. And this is referring to Caucasian Jews, because I am aware of the real actual history of that they stole our birthright. They converted to Judaism. The majority, a lot of these teachings came from our ancient ancestors, which are proven to be Black by the archaeologist John Anthony West, and others have confirmed when they did excavations and research over in the motherland of Kibalan. By the way, this is part 2 of this book, and this was put out by the Nation of Islam. And on a side note, by the way, I did give a disclaimer, and the Nation of Islam put out some years ago. A friend of mine told me there was a Mason that he knew, and I heard this similar story before from another person that I knew that suggested to get these books. They didn't want to go into the details about what actually happened, by the way. And I have a book, by the way, I haven't really gone over separately. I met the guy before. This is the second copy of this book. If you're interested about Freemasonry Beyond the Light, the truth behind it. I never went through official initiation, but throughout the years, I do a lot of research, investigative research, and you're getting incredible information too, by the way. You're not getting somebody, a troll that's hiding behind a fake account. By the way, you're getting somebody that's done research. But he talked about the history behind Prince Hall and there's secrets they don't want to reveal or talk about. So that's why when I reference these books, a friend of mine that shared this with me to get the real information, got it from a friend of his that is a traveling man, that is a Mason, by the way. And I received the same information some years ago, because certain things they don't want to mention. They feel like they'll violate their oath, whatever. But this second book right here goes into the history of the Jim Crow laws. I haven't finished reading it. Both of these books, by the way, I have skimmed through it. I do also have notes on both of these books. This is part one, and they made other versions. But to quote once again, the Nation of Islam, they didn't ask me, and I'm not a member. I don't belong to any organizations, in case you guys are wondering, by the way. They didn't ask me to promote this, so I'm just sharing this as a courtesy to show a solid, credible, investigative research and proper journalism. And you guys can look up the information. Don't take my word for what I'm saying. But they mentioned reference when their historical research department gathered the data that this comes from their own rabbis and synagogues, their own teachings in Jewish libraries, specifically referring to the Caucasian Jews or European Jews, by the way. I'm not referring to, true indigenous people, when you know the true history. And that's just all I'll leave it at for the time being. I'm going to jump in the chat, see if anybody, it looks like we got a lot of people that's jumped in. By the way, Lord Scientist in the building says, salute, my brother from another mother. It's your boy Scientist. How are you? Greetings. Thank you for joining. Gretchen Him says, peace and bliss fire, Dorsey. Gretchen Him says, facts. Okay, thank you. Appreciate you. Digger 420 says, I want to see this guy and Grandmaster Jay do a video together. Mary Saunders says, hello, Mr. Dorsey. Greetings to you, Mary. Thank you for joining. Celeste says, if Lincoln was a Republican, why do most AA lean to the Democratic Party, African Americans? Okay, I think I answered that question already, but when I was going into the history, Elder at the time to answer Celeste's question about why the most, I believe he's meaning African Americans, the acronym for AA, lean to the Democratic Party, is because they felt at the time years ago that Kennedy was looking out for black people, and his brother Robert, who they both were assassinated, by the way. And it was stated to me by Elder, a lot of black people felt at the time that Kennedy was the lesser of two evils, kind of like there was this debate between when Trump was going against Hillary. It was a tumultuous election, bitter fight even within the Democratic Party. By the way, I remember when she ran against Obama back in 2008, and I remember here in Michigan, her and former Governor Jennifer Granholm colluded to keep Obama and John Edwards' name off the ballot. By the way, that's oftentimes not discussed. I learned that from the Mildred Gaddis show at one time, reported on that, by the way, but this oftentimes is not talked about. There's a lot of corruption within the Democratic Party here in Michigan. In the 2016 presidential election, they said there was the turnout at the polling stations did not match the number of people. The ballots that they received did not match the number of people that walked in. The Secretary of State was supposed to investigate that. I'm still wondering what was the update from that, because when you go to renew your driver's license or you go to do things at the Department of Motor Vehicles, aka Secretary of State, they tell you to report voter fraud. And I noticed, so when you have corrupt public officials at the top, it's really hard to get, any true things going on. But hopefully, to answer Celeste's question, this is one of the reasons why. But I found out that what's that president's name? Dwight Eisenhower. He was a Republican. Most black people, the majority of black people, voted for Dwight Eisenhower in 52 and 1956. Don't quote me. It's still people alive to this day, by the way. And Republicans actually played a major role in the Civil Rights Act. And when Kennedy passed his Civil Rights Act, he modeled it after the version that the Republicans passed in the 1800s, by the way. So it's just at the time period, the entitlement programs, as Lyndon Baines Johnson, you can look up, these are not my words, but his quote that he said, I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years, because one of the other reasons, Barry Goldwater, who I don't know too much about, I do have an article on him, by the way, and he was somebody that was like a neo-con. He wasn't maybe the traditional conservative. He had a different idea, and black people felt some of the things at the time they felt was racist. And Malcolm X had even quoted, this was some years later, by the way. Malcolm X, this is on record, you can look this up, had quoted, he felt at the time that the Democrats were more racist than the Republicans, by the way. So even Malcolm X knew the true history. And Martin Luther King was also a registered Republican, by the way. Not saying he would have agreed with all of the political views or things. If you know, some people mention if they bring them into today's society, I asked the question, which version of Martin Luther King would you have? Just like if you were to put LeBron James back in time and have him play during Jordan's era, which I think would be fair for the argument, we would never know. But one thing we do know is Martin Luther King, he was establishment at one time, and he went against the establishment. What I respect about Martin Luther King, because there's people out there that try to call him a coon, and he wasn't a coon. He woke up near the end before he was assassinated and stood up to the establishment. He was once an insider, part of establishment, but when he saw what was going on, there was even a quote where he even stated, I'm afraid I'm leading my people into a burning house, before he unfortunately was assassinated and murdered, as many other activists were during that time period, Medgar Evans and many others. So hopefully I answered that question. To jump back in the chat, again, let me see. Gretchen Helm says, peace, fire, fire. I just saw you somewhere, maybe an Aboriginal TV channel. Okay, dear, thank you. Yeah, either that or Young Pharaoh. Okay. Gretchen Helm says, can you speak to the relationship with Democrats and the KKK? Yes, I did briefly earlier, by the way. There's a misconception in the Black community, too, about Black Wall Street, because there was talk because of the recent holiday, Juneteenth, which is a holiday that the slaves were freed on, which is also my mother's birthday, by the way. So that's why there's a lot going on. But a lot of the true history that's not actually told, it was the Republicans were the abolitionists that fought to end slavery. Once again, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. When you look at the history in one of the documents I'm going over, they were the main pioneers originally. Not only did the Republicans pass the 13th Amendment, they also passed the 14th Amendment and trying to make Black people U.S. citizens, actually corporate citizens to get more specific, but that gets into like a whole deeper category. But to keep things simple, historically, the Republicans were the ones that fought to end slavery. They were the abolitionists. And that's why for a number of years, until Barry Goldwater and things changed, when Kennedy came along, why Blacks switched over, the majority of Black people switched over to the Democratic Party. And once again, I'm not affiliated with neither political party. I'm not pitching. I'm just showing you I can report on information from a fair, balanced perspective. But it's important, I think, that people get the facts. And instead of posting memes, someone can see an actual face. You know, I'm not hiding behind a ghost account. This is research anybody can look up. There's still information online that you can pull up despite the censorship, but you won't get a lot of Black nationalists won't talk about this. Even Michael Imhotep from the African History Network, who I met, who I've even purchased some of his DVDs in the past, because a lot of people are boule people, which they're pledged to many different secret societies and fraternities and organizations and stuff, and they won't tell people the actual truth. So I recommend Black people, melanated people, brainstorm, because you're being misled by the mainstream media that's trying to invoke a race war. There is sad things that do occur, anomalies that do need to be addressed. At the same time, you want to use critical thinking and brainstorm and look up your history. Your history is important. There was a saying that if you don't learn from your history, you can be condemned to repeat it, by the way. So a lot of Black people are misled. There's I even learned in more recent times about the Black codes. I actually just did research, and I wasn't sure. I found that out the other day, that it was Democrats that passed the Black codes, by the way, because I was invited to a call a few years ago, part of the TDA movement, and on one of the calls, there was a brother had brought up the Black codes or whatever, and that was actually started by the Democrats, by the way. So historically, so the connection again to the holiday Juneteenth, a lot of Black people brought up with Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street years ago. And at that time, I believe that happened 1921. When I researched some years ago, don't take my word for it, you can look it up. It was members, they say the Ku Klux Klan was at its highest peak during that time period. They were around 21 million. They came from the southern states that were Democrat. So it was mostly Democrats that destroyed Black Wall Street, by the way. Ain't that an oxymoron? You got all these Black people that vote Democrat, don't even know it was mainly Democrats involved in destroying Black Wall Street. This is a fact. I told two of my relatives recently that are liberal, by the way. Just a hint, do your research, but they were at their largest peak. The Democratic Party, look it up, organized, they created the KKK, they organized it. And notice that they always point the finger because there is flaws, definitely flaws on both sides, but there's more corruption and flaws. The globalists, the ruling class elite are using the Democratic Party as an arm to overthrow the country, brainwash, indoctrinate people, and push these agendas to bring us into socialism, which eventually leads to communism, by the way. And there's videos, look at what they do in North Korea and Cuba, by the way. They actually disappeared. They arrested people. And you're in communist countries, you're liable. You think the police or things are bad now. In communism, things will be far worse. And they're talking about completely defunding the police. So you're talking about the movie Purge, total chaos. That's, it's not going to end well. Historically, if you look up the history on socialism and communism, by the way, just on a side note, don't take my word for it. It's always failed. It's never worked. Capitalism is not perfect. It has its flaws, but capitalism gives you the ability to go from nowhere, rags to riches, real actual stories. It allowed for Jay-Z and T.I. to be drug dealers and reach the plateau. If they were in the Philippines and look up in their country, Duerto actually even had his mayors killed and other people for selling drugs, by the way. So people, you need to learn your history and geography around the world and how other countries do things. We have a lot of things to be blessed about that does make America great, by the way, that a lot of people don't even think take advantage of the amenities. And a lot of people who push these agendas still benefit off of capitalism. Like Colin Kaepernick is super rich, by the way, super wealthy. How much of that money did you give back to the Black community specifically? Now, I'm not trying to hate. I'm just saying, because when activists years ago, such as Aretha Franklin, many others, artists, Sam Cooke, during their time periods, they risked their lives. And Muhammad Ali risked going to jail, by the way, for standing up for what he stood up for. It's not the same comparison, I don't think. I think it's a different comparison. That's why I respect Muhammad Ali, the original activist in the 60s, a lot of the people, because when they did it, it wasn't about the glitz, the glamour. Nowadays, you can be celebrated and just loved, just for because the mainstream media, which Malcolm X even talked about at the time, he knew is used as a propaganda machine that can be used to make an evil person look good and make a good person look bad. There was a quote, a meme online. So I'm gonna jump back in the chat real quick. By the way, Lord Scientist said, okay, let me jump back up. Says, yeah, either that or Young Pharaoh. Okay, can you speak to, okay, hopefully I answered that question, Gretchen. Digger 420 says, I want to see Dorsey's reasons on the Young Pharaoh and Grandmaster Jay. I am aware of who Young Pharaoh is, Grandmaster Jay. I didn't hear if there was a video that was done on that, about that recently. Let me know what it's about, by the way. But yeah, big shout out to Young Pharaoh. I know who he is. I've looked at SETI, some of the other activists, by the way. I met Umar personally, Professor Griff, by the way, personally, I have a photo with, and others. So I do respect activism, definitely, no doubt, by the way. So let me know what that's about. And, I can check that out when I get a chance. Lord Scientist says, teach the people facts. Money Boy in the building, fam, says, what's up, family? What's up to you, Money Boy? Greetings to you. Kudos. Thank you for joining. Celeste says, thank you for the explanation. Much appreciated. Gerald Jilk says, first time here and glad to be here. Thank you, Gerald, for joining. Gretchen Helm says, facts, fire. Appreciate you. Victor Colin says 13, 14, and 15. Yep. Thank you. You're correct. By the way, I didn't know too much about the 15th Amendment. See, I'm doing research myself, so I don't know everything. I'm not a know-it-all. You guys help me out as well. I learn from you, as well as you guys learn from me. It's a give and take. So, I'm not a know-it-all. So thank you for that, Victor. Princess Daniel says, straight facts, B.O.B. Celeste, welcome. Gerald, okay, thank you. Gretchen Helm says, peace, love, and honor, fire. Princess Daniels. Gretchen Helm says, welcome, peace, and bliss. Okay, let me scroll down. Princess Daniels says, GH, peace and greatness to the entire chat. Gretchen Helm says, facts. Victor Colin says, facts, speak it. Okay, appreciate you. Gretchen Helm says, because they don't know. Yeah, and I'm just trying to set the record straight. That's why I'm here to provide clarification. Moneyboy Film said, you always dropping them good nuggets, Dorsey. Yeah, appreciate you. So to get back into, I'll jump back in the chat. later. But to continue on going over the history, I was reading from after the Civil War, Republicans pushed the 13th Amendment, adopted December 6, 1865. So they were responsible for mainly Juneteenth. It was the Democratic, it was the Republican Party, which this wasn't a long time ago. It's just things I explained earlier. If you go back and watch the video after this uploads about why the switch, by the way, why a lot of black people switched over to the Democratic Party. And once again, Southern Democrats tried to force black people to continue to be slaves. They effectively attempted to re-enslave them by passing the Black Codes and Jim Crow laws. I went over that already, but just to reemphasize, that's important. Democrats were responsible for those Jim Crow. They voted for those, by the way. It wasn't the Republicans. It says on November 22nd, 1965, Republicans denounced Mississippi's Democrat legislature for enacting Black codes as they institutionalized discrimination, such as an 1865 Mississippi Black Code, which stated no freedom, Negro or mulatto should carry or keep firearms or ammunition. You see, yep. And that's one of the reasons originally why the NRA was created, was to help protect free black slaves, the National Rifle Association. By the way, once again, it was the Democrats who were mainly involved in trying to keep black people property, slaves, indentured servants, by the way. This is historically. On February 5th, 1866, Republican Congressman Thaddeus Stevens introduced legislation to give former slaves 40 acres and a mule, but Democrats opposed it, led by President Andrew Johnson, excuse me. Wow. So, I don't have any qualm about, the statutes and stuff coming down. Me personally, I do understand people's frustration. I don't know why in some instances they are being memorialized. I do understand the other aspect, how some people say it's part of our history, by the way, but some of these people, they shouldn't be memorialized if they did do, bad things. I think society has changed for the better, but we still have progress to make. And that's why I'm doing this video, to try to help inform, properly educate people and give them accurate information. By the way, that's oftentimes not discussed or talked about by the mainstream media or black nationalists. By the way, April 9th, 1866, Republicans in Congress overrode President Johnson's veto and passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866, conferring rights of citizenship on free slaves, to force Southern states to extend state citizenship rights to former slaves. Republicans in the U.S. House passed the 14th Amendment May 10th, 1866, as did the Senate June 8th, 1866. So you see, Republicans, they tried to help in many different regards. This was the Republican Party, by the way. But that is a whole nother topic within itself, because some people don't know about, just to keep it basic, don't know about the private side or status correction. And there's another deeper aspect. A lot of people on both sides don't know. So I won't go that deep. I'll just try to keep this basic. 100% of Democrats voted against it, by the way. Wow, that's news to me. The 14th Amendment was adopted by the states on July 28th, 1868. Republican Congressman John Farnsworth of Illinois stated March 31st, 1871. The reason for the adoption of the 14th Amendment was because of discriminating legislation of those states, by which they were punishing one class of men under different laws from another class, by the way. So this was stated by Republican Congressman John Farnsworth of Illinois, once again, March 31st, 1871. It says, along with Jim Crow law, Southern Democrats attempted to keep former slaves from voting, by the way. Once again, mighty funny today they talk about voter suppression, but historically, they were originally the suppressors, by the way. This is historically. I'll read that again. Along with Jim Crow laws, this is facts, by the way. Southern Democrats attempted to keep former slaves from voting, by the way. On January 8th, 1867, Republicans granted voting rights to former slaves in the District of Columbia by overriding President Andrew Johnson's veto. On July 19th, 1867, Republicans passed more legislation protecting voting rights of freed slaves after overriding, again, President Andrew Johnson's veto. On March 30th, 1868, Republicans began impeachment proceedings of President Andrew Johnson, by the way. On September 12, 1868, Democrats in Georgia Senate expelled civil rights activist Tunis Campbell and 24 other Republican African Americans who would later be reinstated by a Republican Congress. Let me read that again. On September 12th, 1868, Democrats in Georgia's Senate expelled civil rights activist Tunis Campbell and 24 other Republican African Americans who would later be reinstated by a Republican Congress. So you see how historically these are a lot of things that don't get talked about, by the way. And on a side note, I went over once again, Republicans started Howard University for blacks. Republicans also started Spelman College, and Republican Henry L. Morehouse helped start Morehouse College, by the way. They also started Fisk University, Shaw University as well. And another thing that doesn't get talked about, Obama cut the funding for black HSBCUs when President Trump increased the funding, by the way. This oftentimes doesn't get talked about or a light shined upon. So let me see if any more people came in the chat. Okay, I'll jump. Okay, so remember, this is also Q&A, guys, so don't hesitate to jump in. I'm reading from two different sites going over information, the truth about the Democratic Party, what they don't tell you. So on October 22nd, 1868, while campaigning for re-election, Republican Congressman James Hines was assassinated by Democrats who had organized vigilante groups. So they said that happened October 22nd, 1868. The 15th Amendment granting the right to vote to all men, regardless of race, was passed February 3rd, 1870, overcoming 97% Democrat opposition. Wow. Once Southern Democrats could no longer keep former slaves from voting, they attempted to intimidate them through KKK-type vigilante activities and lynchings. Let me read that again. Once Southern Democrats could no longer keep former slaves from voting, this is the Democratic Party history, this is facts, they attempted to intimidate them through KKK-type vigilantes, activities, and lynchings. And mind you, when I mentioned Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, because it was brought up Juneteenth, some of the real history, Democrats are mostly responsible, because when I researched that some years ago and looked into that, they said the members of the Ku Klux Klan, by the way, were at their highest peak during that time period, around over 21 million. And they came from different parts of the country and dropped like firebombs in that region. So, you know, they came from a lot of the southern states, by the way, because they were started, organized, Democratic Party was started and organized by the Democratic Party, the KKK, by the way, which oftentimes you won't hear this from Al Sharpton, Roland Martin, and others, black nationalists and mainstream media, when they do cover or talk about history, by the way. Republican President U.S. Grant signed the Enforcement Act May 31st, 1870, which imposed stiff penalties for depriving any American of their civil rights. The Republican Congress, June 22nd, 1870, created the U.S. Department of Justice to safeguard civil rights against Democrats in the South. This is history. I'll read that again. The Republican Congress, June 22nd, 1870, created the U.S. Department of Justice to safeguard civil rights against Democrats in the South. This is facts. By the way, this information has already been vetted. The Republican Congress passed another Enforcement Act, February 28, 1871, which provided federal protection for black voters, by the way. And where I'm reading from, it's going to eventually go into more recent times, into the next turn of the century, by the way. So I'm gonna see how far down before we get to that part. Okay, so we're getting there. Okay, I'm gonna jump up a little bit. I didn't read this part yet. During World War II, General Dwight Eisenhower forbade racism and made the decision to arm Black American soldiers with weapons. In 1952 and 1956, it states a majority of Black Americans voted for Republican President Eisenhower. Wow, this is news to me. I just learned this in more recent times, just doing research. Eisenhower ordered desegregation of Washington, D.C. public schools after the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision. When Southern Democrat governors resisted desegregation, Republican Eisenhower sent in federal troops, by the way. By the way, this is facts. This was even on PBS, Eyes on the Prize. But sometimes when this history is told, it's told in such a manner to try to keep blacks on the Democratic slave plantation, by the way. And I want to say on the record once again, I'm not affiliated with neither political party, but I'm going over facts and evidence, the truth about the Republican Party, the Democrats, some of the reasons why the majority of a lot of black people, melanated people, switched over to the Democratic Party, by the way. But I'm going over the racist history of the Democratic Party. They don't tell you about the prejudices they oftentimes, are silent about, by the way. There's always another side to the story. And it's important that you do your own investigative research. Don't take my word for what I'm saying, but I think this is going over. It's important because I've seen the brainwashing too much on Facebook, Instagram, with all the memes. And Democrats, once again, as I read previously, if you go back once this video after it's uploaded, they started the black codes, by the way. It wasn't Republicans, it was Democrats. Eisenhower forced integration by ordering federal soldiers to escort black students. In 1953, Republican Vice President Richard Nixon chaired a committee which sought to eliminate discrimination on the basis of race or color in employment practices of government contractors, by the way. In 1957 and 1959, Republican President Eisenhower proposed civil rights bills to enforce the 15th Amendment, strengthening the rights of African Americans to vote. Senate Democrats filibustered the bills and watered them down. In 1959, when Southern Democrats demanded that any who violated the new civil rights bill should be tried before all-white Southern juries, Republican Vice President Nixon gave the deciding Senate vote to kill the Southern Amendment. So on to the next part. So if you guys caught that, I'll read that again. Democrats demanded that any who violated the new civil rights bill should be tried before all-white Southern juries. Republican Vice President Nixon gave the deciding Senate vote to kill the Southern Amendment, by the way. And going over the history, once again, this shows you how, from what I previously read, the Democrats were fighting for a number of years to keep black people enslaved. It just changed into a different form through the entitlement programs. An elder who's very knowledgeable, who's seen the pyramids in Egypt, Kemet Akibaline, stated to me that's when our people should have received. Martin Luther King was pushing for reparations during this time period. It was a tumultuous time period, but he felt he had to take the lesser of two evils, and it was allegedly quoted. I don't have the facts behind this aspect, so don't quote me on it. But former President Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, allegedly told Martin Luther King that they're not ready, or the rest of America. He was trying to get as much done to help the blacks at the time as much as he could, by the way. And later down the road, before Martin Luther King was assassinated, he said, "I'm afraid I'm leading my people into a burning house," because when Lyndon Baines Johnson quoted on record after he signed the new Civil Rights Act bill of, I think, either 1964 or 1965, it's the reason why Barry Goldwater opposed that, because he felt it would keep black people enslaved for a number of years. And this also isn't talked about, this tidbit of information, by the way. So this particular legislation, Lyndon Baines Johnson is quoted on record, by the way, who also played a role in Kennedy's assassination. And Bush's father, the one that died, that had the funeral, he was head of the CIA at one time, Central Intelligence Agency, by the way. And these people were connected to J. Edgar Hoover. A lot of the older black generation that I talk to, who many of them are liberal, do still admit to me, the ones who are willing to talk about this information, the real information, admits that J. Edgar Hoover did not like Martin Luther King. He did not like Malcolm X. He did not like the Kennedys, by the way. And even the Black Panther Party. This led into the 70s. This also goes into the feminist movement, which isn't talked about, was created to destabilize the infrastructure of the Black civil rights movement, where you had black men and women marching together. This is what Black Lives Matter should be focusing on, is rebuilding the family structure. But because it was started by a lot of lesbians, they want to be on top. They don't want to be submissive, and you're not going to have you're going to have dysfunction And you're not going to have a stabilized race or culture of people if the woman is the head. The man is supposed to be a leader by nature, by default. And I'm not saying this, I'm not a chauvinist or anything. I don't belong to no organizations, but from a balance aspect, they should be focusing on the rebuilding of the Black family structure. By the way, but the elder was sharing with me at the time, they felt Kennedy was one of the few, he was looking out for them. So to answer the question from earlier, this is why a lot of Black people, melanated people, switched over to the Democratic Party. It's not that this elder told me they felt they trusted Kennedy because he was still a white man to them in their eyes during this time period. They felt he was looking out for them more so than the Republicans at the time, by the way. But as I'm read prior to this, the Republican Conservative Party did a lot for Black people. And it's the reason why the majority at one time prior to the 60s, majority of Black people were about until the mid 60s were majority Republican before they switched over to the Democrats. And I'm not pitching any political party. Once again, I did give a disclaimer. I'm not affiliated with either party, but it's important that I feel like my people get the credible facts and history, by the way. And hopefully this can complement the videos that Yusuf has been doing with the 21 protocols, the elders of Zion, by the way, where he's covered that topic. This complements that information too, by the way. And a goal put out by the Nation of Islam's Historical Research Department. Oftentimes this shows the name of the families, the slave ships that they own. You find that it's not a coincidence that Caucasian European Jews, they own the tech companies. There's been members of the Federal Reserve have hardly ever been Black. The U.S. Treasury, they've all been Jewish names. When you look up the ancestry, the history, by the way, I have another book. It's the reason why I went over the book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati. And this is very important for Black people, melanated people, to distinguish that these are not all the same Caucasian people. You have Irish Caucasian people. You have German, Scottish, Welsh, English, Greek, and Black people, you know, they're being used as pawns in this propaganda machine that the mainstream media is not telling you the whole entire truth. That's why I recommend this book. And I'm going to show this other book, by the way. This book right here, put out, called Bloodlines of the Illuminati by Fritz Springmeier. This is a very important book. We'll give you the important history to connect the pieces and actual facts versus a lot of the misinformation propaganda that's put out there. But once again, I recommend, if you can still find this book, a friend of mine told me recently, this is no longer in print. This book is called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, put out by the Nation of Islam. And they stated their historical research department put that this was in their own Caucasian Jewish libraries, their own writings from synagogues, rabbis, their own libraries. So this was their information. They just researched, put it together, but it lists the names of their families, lineage that played a role in slavery and still plays a role in our modern day society with keeping people enslaved through the banking system, financial system. Like when I attended the Pastor Tony King seminar some years ago, it's my belief that he's a front person for Caucasian Jews at the DTC, why they were easily cut us off the black card, by the way, in my opinion. By the way, he was just a mouthpiece, but he could only do so much, but they're hiding behind the scenes because it's not a coincidence. Many of them have been appointed as members of the Treasury Department. When you look at their lineage, you look at their bloodline, chairmen of the Federal Reserve, you know, from Jacob Lew to Janet Yellen to just the different names, Ben Bernanke. You know, when you study the bloodlines, the lineage, you'll find out the facts, who started the banking system. That's why I went over those documentaries. And YouTube is in cahoots as well, the big tech companies. It's not a coincidence. Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, German or Ashkenazi, a Caucasian Jew. George Soros, Hungarian Jew, by the way. Who else? By the way, and there's those out there who try to say I'm being anti-Semitic, but I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm going over the facts because the real information is they're using my people as a pawn in this, and I want to put out the facts. And I'm tired of seeing this abuse of my people on a chessboard being used as pawns. And I encourage my melanated people out there. I'm not trying to be biased or prejudiced, but I encourage you, you need to do your research and get the facts behind these books and information I'm going over. The second book deals with a lot of how the Jews played a role with the Democratic Party with the KKK and voted for the Jim Crow laws and things of that sort. And this book uncovers even their connection to Freemasons, by the way, how they played a role. There's even a chapter that deals in here. So you see, I'm showing actual documentation. That's why they want to burn the books. One of the things during Germany, before Hitler took over completely, they burned the books, had a book burning. I heard something like this took place at Berkeley University. I can neither confirm nor deny, but allegedly I hear that they're actually they're removing books, even pages from books. They don't want you having physical documentation. So you want to document all of the information that you come across on the internet. If it's YouTube videos, you want to find the software, try to download them, because they're attempting to try to suppress this information and get rid of it because they want people to be brainwashed, programmed on their mainstream narrative. By the way, because the mainstream media is 98% liberal. So I'm a real actual person coming to you in real time, by the way. And this is not conspiracy theories. A theory is something that's theoretical or hasn't been proven. You have something called conspiracy reality, which is in real time, and you have something called a conspiracy fact. You already have facts that have already occurred. That's actually not. You have people that conspire when you break the words down. But the information I'm going over is highly, highly accurate, and I encourage you and my own people to please do your research and investigate this very in depth, because many of you all are being misinformed, you're being misled, or you're bad actors, you're being paid by George Soros and many other groups. I saw a video that Lisa Haven did at on the Trump rally before he became president in 2016, when the Chicago police shut down a rally that was funded by the Clinton Foundation and also David Brock from Media Matters. She showed the actual proof. She got the documents off of Scripps, which also has a lot of redemption documents on there. So I'm giving you guys credible information. You can research. Don't take my word for what I'm saying, but I encourage you research the information so you will find out the validity and do your own assessment. I also gave a disclaimer. By the way, these are my opinions. However, this is based off of facts and credible investigative research that I've done. So I'll continue to finish reading a little bit, by the way, and I'm going to jump back in the chat. I don't know how many. I can't see the chat screen right now, in case you're wondering. I'm reading from another screen. But it says Southern Democrats who oppose desegregation included former KKK Klansman Senator Robert Byrd and Governor George Wallace. So let me read that again. It says Southern Democrats who oppose desegregation included former KKK Klansman Senator Robert Byrd and Governor George Wallace. Now, Robert Byrd, by the way, this is oftentimes not talked about. He was very good friends with Hillary Clinton and Bill. After he died, they, made sure they gave specific big condolences to him. By the way, this is Hillary Clinton's ties to the KKK, by the way, in case people are wondering. And Senator Robert Byrd, according to a lady from Muskegon, Michigan, I'm going to try to think of her name. I believe it's Kathy O'Brien, and you had another lady named Bryce Taylor, but Kathy O'Brien from Muskegon, Michigan mentioned, if this video is still on YouTube, you have to look it up. I can't say if it's still on there, but she was admitted she was part of the MK Ultra, which is a private government operation, and she said Robert Byrd was one of her handlers or did some things to her. So there's been activist whistleblowers who come out. So not only was he connected to the KKK, he was also part of this black ops government secret operation, because they had many, such as Operation Paperclip, Operation Prism, like what the NSA did, numerous ones. So just keep in mind, I'm going over facts for you, but okay, I'm finished reading. After the Birmingham Children's Crusade protests, where police dogs and fire hoses were used against blacks, President Kennedy called for a bill emulating the Republican Civil Rights Act of 1875, by the way. So it says, I'm going to read that again. After the Birmingham Children's Crusade protests where police dogs and fire hoses were used against Black Americans during this time period, President Kennedy called for a bill which emulated the Republican Civil Rights Act of 1875. So the Republican Party gave Kennedy the model that was used later on down the line. Once again, Republicans were the abolitionists that fought to end slavery. The Republican Party, historically, it was the Democrats who tried to keep black people enslaved. This is why I'm doing this video. This is not being addressed or talked about. Southern Democrats fervently opposed it, as Democrat Senator Richard Russell in 1864. Says we will resist to the bitter end. And the Dixiecrats were a separate party of the political of the Democrats that were what you would consider today what they would be called racist, by the way. So this showed Kennedy was going against opposition within his own party, being a Democrat, by the way. And this even still continues to this day. I have a relative that told me even within local elections within the city of Detroit, they would snatch lawns off her grass because of the bitter fights. This is infighting. A lot of mafia has ties. That would be a whole separate video, like how the Italian mob is still, running involved in a lot of cities and has history in Chicago and Detroit, by the way. And I have some separate notes, but I don't want to branch off on that, by the way. So it states, this next section I'm going to read from says, we will resist to the bitter end any measure or any movement which would have a tendency to bring about social equality and intermingling and amalgamation of the races in our southern states. So it was the Southerners. Now, one thing I was speaking with the elder about recently, and I agreed with them on this, the southern states, they wanted to keep Democrat Southerners wanted to keep blacks enslaved, of course. Well, however, we agreed with the aspect of the states' rights, that there needs to be a level of states' rights versus too much encroachment from the federal government. So one of the aspects we, of course, we don't agree with the slavery aspect, but we did agree with how they were for states' rights, by the way. And that's why there's kind of been a conflict throughout the years between states and federal rights, by the way, and differences of that sort. I'll go over this again. Democrat Senator Robert Byrd filibustered the Civil Rights Bill for 14 hours and 13 minutes on June 10th, 1964. He was a member of the KKK, and he was also very good friends with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. They made sure, if the video is still up, they gave major condolences to him, by the way. This is a fact. This isn't hearsay or conspiracy theory. This is facts. I know this for a fact to be evident. Democrat Senator Strom Thurmond stated in 1964, he stated, this so-called civil rights proposal, which the president has sent to Capitol Hill for enactment into law, are unconstitutional, unnecessary, unwise, and extend beyond the realm of reason. This is the worst civil rights package ever presented to the Congress and is reminiscent of the Reconstruction proposals and actions of the radical Republican Congress. Says, I'll continue to read. The phrase, the bribe or bullet, refers to positive or negative human motivations, as generations of parents motivated children with a piece of candy for obedience or discipline for disobedience. Okay, now it's jumping down to Lyndon Baines Johnson. It says he quoted, these Negroes, this is a quote that I'm reading, I'll show you guys from. It says, these Negroes, they're getting pretty uppity these days. That's a problem for us. They've got something now they never had before. The political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. This was quoted by Democrat Lyndon Baines Johnson, by the way. So let me see if the cameras refocus. So I want you guys to see that, by the way. So I'm gonna in a little bit I'm gonna get back to the chat section. I just want to refocus the camera, but I want you guys, everyone that's watching, to see that, by the way. This is what they don't tell you about the Democratic Party, by the way. It's not a very long time ago that this was going on. And this is why I will answer some of the questions why large portions of the Black community have stayed impoverished in certain demographics across the country, and why they intimidate other Black people, and they use Black people who are part of these secret societies and belong to Antifa, Black Lives Matter, also have connections to Eastern Stars and Freemasons, Prince Hall, secret societies, by the way, because that's how they're communicating behind the scenes. I didn't pledge for any of those organizations. This means I worked hard for a lot of the things that I acquired. I got, like I even mentioned the company that I work for. I tell a good friend of mine, I was there before a lot of these Black people came in. Now I can say some of these social justice managers, I was there. I was interviewed by a white guy, Chief Sousa at the time, by the way. So I didn't get, free handouts and things like some people who belong to these organizations. A sister quoted to me recently. She said she noticed she's other people are paying attention, that she noticed a lot of people who are part of these organizations, she said, live really good and get exemptions and privileges that other citizens people don't. It's not a coincidence, but it's also how they're snitching on people behind the scenes, people that belong to these groups. And a lot of people are afraid to mention that, by the way, but I'm not, and it shows you they're the main ones that are agents and gatekeepers you have to watch out for. Not saying all of the people that belong to those groups are bad, but you have to pay attention to people that belong to these different organizations and who their allegiance is to. I myself, I don't belong to any organizations on a record, by the way, and this is a fact currently. I don't have no card carrying membership or none of that. This is why I'm bringing you real facts from independent journalism, by the way, and what the mainstream media won't cover, things of that sort. So I'm gonna finish reading from the Civil War to Lyndon Johnson. By the way, I'm just trying to see if I read that part. Okay, it says Southern Democrats were accused of utilizing negative motivation, negative intimidation tactics to keep African Americans from voting. So let me read that again. It's this part. This quote says from the Civil War to Lyndon Johnson, Southern Democrats were accused of utilizing negative motivation, intimidation tactics to keep African Americans from voting. As television and media coverage of these tactics grew, it resulted in bad press for the Democratic Party. Political strategists proposed a switch from the bullet to the bribe, from intimidation to entitlement. In other words, if the African American vote could no longer be suppressed, then maybe it could be manipulated and controlled through dependency and entitlement programs. Would anyone vote to stop receiving free money? Even though Democrat senators filibustered the civil rights legislation nonstop for 71 days, from March 30th to June 10th, President Lyndon Johnson persuaded the leaders of his party to support a watered-down compromise bill, which he signed July 2nd, 1964. According to Ronald Kessler's book, Inside the White House, 1996, Lyndon Johnson explained his abrupt change in strategy to two Democrat governors aboard Air Force One, saying, I'll have those N-words, like I quoted earlier, voting Democrat for the next 200 years. This is him right here, by the way. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society Welfare State proceeded to enroll large numbers of minorities into entitlement programs, one leading to a dependency and a strong inclination to vote for the party, promising a continuance of those entitlements. Mighty funny how you have a lot of Democrats that come along and they offer, that they're going to do things. They make a lot of promises, by the way, for our people when they campaign in urban areas. Now, I agree that there's flaws to the Republican Party, in my opinion. They need to do more activism in poor urban minority areas. That's what I think Turning Point USA, I think, does the best they can. But I think other Republicans in this fight, political fight, where I believe, in my opinion, I don't have ties to either political party, but from my assessment, it appears as though the Democratic Party is being used by the ruling class elite, the globalists, to bring in socialism and communism, a totalitarian, authoritarian regime, aka the New World Order. By the way, I think, in my opinion, Republicans need to do more activism in urban poor areas to show, kind of like when Tim Scott gave his example recently, how he got pulled over by the police, to empathize with, the poor, those suffering middle-class minorities, because Democrats waged a good public relations campaign against them. But this is why I'm going over the other side of the information, too, by the way, going over Lyndon Johnson I was reading from recently, and I'm going to show you guys again where I'm reading from. It says, go over it again. Lyndon Johnson, Great Society Welfare State, proceeded to enroll large numbers of minorities into entitlement programs, leading to a dependency and strong inclination to vote for the party, promising a continuance of those entitlements. So once again, that's why you have year after year many Black people that's jump ship, that have left the plantation, are tired of it, because Democrats, they will make promises, but then they'll turn around and champion another cause instead of like championed rebuilding the family structure, or one thing for years, so now all of a sudden, they're pretending, to be, they care so much, because it's a lot at stake this political year, by the way. But I'm going over the other side. As you guys can see, I'll continue to read a little bit more before I get to the chat. It says, Lyndon Johnson, with the help of Democrat Senator Edward Kennedy, changed immigration quotas to bring in a large number of immigrants from poor countries who would enroll in entitlement programs and thus be more likely to vote for Democrat candidates who promise continued entitlements. The welfare state provided more money to a household if a father was not present in the home. This is how they broke apart the Black family structure strategically. In many cases, was connected to Planned Parenthood and eugenics, and was funded by the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, and other groups when they steered a lot of Black families away from the civil rights movement and promoted feminism. It was quoted on record, Gloria Steinem, who was sitting next to Hillary Rodham Clinton the night she lost to Trump, by the way. I was wondering where I recognized this lady from. She admitted, this is declassified, that she was sent in as an agent by former FBI J. Edgar Hoover. This is declassified on record. This is a fact. She infiltrated the Black community and recruited a Black woman by the name of Michelle Wallace to push feminism. This is how Black women have been used as a tool, and why BLM, there's a fraudulent aspect of it, and why Dr. Boyce Watkins even talked about it as well. By the way, it's one of the few people to report on more credible information versus other Black nationalists who won't touch on things that I'm going over. By the way, the concerns they need to be focused on if you really want to create change, because people, when you grow up in a proper balanced family structure, are less likely to follow peer pressure. By the way, you have a better work ethic. Sometimes it has to be worked on over time. It's not going to maybe necessarily happen overnight, but when you have positive role models, positive influences, but looting and rioting and things of that sort, and being promoted by Hollywood and actors bailing people out of jail, shows you, where we've gone. Now, I'm all for activism, protest. However, but when it gets into rioting, looting, there's where you draw the line at, where you're targeting innocent people, and they even burn apartment complexes. I'm hearing even in Minnesota, by the way. So you got to think about that. So go over to finish reading. The welfare state provided more money to a household if a father was not present in the home. This adversely affected the strong church-centered Black families and neighborhoods. As lower income voters grew and their dependency on government programs, it proportionally increased the Democratic Party's voting constituency. Robert Rexer and Rachel Sheffield, writing for this Heritage Foundation, stated in the backgrounder hashtag 2955 on poverty and inequality that prior to LBJ's war on poverty, less than 2% of the federal budget was on welfare spending. 50 years later, that spending on anti-poverty programs mushroomed to 27% of the federal budget, costing $22 trillion, adjusted for inflation, 3 times the cost of all U.S. military wars since the revolution. Yet the percentage of people in poverty has not improved. Before LBJ's war on poverty, less than 5% of children were born to unmarried parents. 50 years later, it has skyrocketed to 40%. Before LBJ's war on poverty, less than 10% of U.S. children lived in single-parent households. 50 years later, that number has exploded to 33%, with the poverty rate of single female parent households growing to 37.1%. And I would say that number is higher within the African-American community, by the way, just to go over. So now I'm gonna jump in the chat. By the way, I was reading from a site. I skipped down a little bit. So in case you're joining me, if you're wondering, you're joining Dorsey's Resource. Oh, I got Currency 365 in the building. $100. Thank you for the super chat. Currency 365 says, very busy, but stopping by to say hi. Shalom, shalom to you, my brother. Peace to you. Peace to the God. Greetings to you. I do recognize other faiths, by the way. So just keep that in mind. I mentioned that before in other videos. too. So I'm going to get to the chat. Thank you for the super chat once again. Appreciate you. And those of you out there, I've been checking out Currency 365 has been putting out good work, doing the level best. I heard the video with Benny. That video the other day with Benny was fire. By the way, check out that video with Benny recently. I can't remember which one it was. What Benny was talking about is trolls of people trying to infiltrate through this lady named Karen. He knows Benny was keeping it real, so that was real. So I check out Currency 365. He shared my work. Very good brother. Appreciate him. So to jump back into the chat section, let me find out where things left off. By the way, jump back in. Okay, find out Victor Cullen. I think it will forfeit our rights to the land. What you think? Okay, somebody looks like they're having a conversation. Okay, let me jump back up. Looks like wow, it's a lot of you guys jumped in. Kudos. I might have to I'm trying to find where I left off at, because I get to reading. Okay, Princess Daniels says, GH, peace and greatness. Thank you to the entire chat. Okay, I think I read that part. Gretchen Helm says facts. Okay, I read that part. Okay, let me jump back down. Gretchen Helm says, thank you at Dorsey's Resource. I was sharing the video. Fire. Appreciate you, Gretchen. Thank you very much. Kudos to you. Sandra Sinkowitz says, great stuff. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Appreciate you all for joining once again. Moneyboy says, film says, the Democrats created the KKK. The Republican Party was started by 150 black people and 20 whites. Yes, okay. See, there's other information that you guys can help corroborate the information I'm going over. Because once again, I say I'm not a know-it-all, so you guys help me out. I'm learning. I've come across this information recently. Like I just found out, to reiterate, the Democrats created the black codes, by the way. So Princess Daniel says, it's pausing on my end. The message is held for review. Digger 420 says, in 1902, a law was passed called the Dick Act, which abolishes all gun control and cannot be repealed. By the way, 1902, a law was passed called the Dick Act, which abolishes all gun control and cannot. Okay, that's good information. I'm not sure how that would apply, Digger 420, but that's good information. Celeste says, eye-opening history lesson. Thanks for sharing. God bless you, Dorsey. Appreciate you. God bless you as well. Praises be to the Most High. Princess Daniel says, yes, that Brown case is very important. They gave us this case in my paralegal studies. Yes, Brown versus the Board of Education. I read it early. I've heard about it. It was mentioned in the PBS documentary Eyes on the Prize years ago, which they do excellent work. I like PBS, by the way. But I think it's important to cover what a lot of the mainstream other outlets, and I like to go more in depth information. That's why I'm doing this video, because I've been meaning to for a while, by the way. And it's not a coincidence. I'm wearing this to show you guys, you know, I've done my homework, by the way. Says Princess Daniel says, Jada Lynn says, hello, greetings to you. Thank you for joining, Jada. Princess Daniel says, straight facts, Central Intelligence. Yeah. Moneyboy Film says, the real information. Okay, Gretchen Hill says, this message is held for review. I'm not sure that's YouTube doing that. Thank you again, Gretchen. Peace to you. Princess Daniel says, they killed all 4 of them for the same reason. Yes. And during that time period, J. Edgar Hoover, Lyndon Baines Johnson would be the equivalent of the deep state, and George Bush Sr., the one they had the funeral for not too long ago, that was like known as Daddy Bush. He was head of the CIA, by the way, at the time. And this declassified, I heard the reason why Trump was one of the few presidents that declassified the Kennedy files, by the way. A lot of the previous presidents up going back to Clinton had a chance to do it, to declassify, but they refused to, which this is why I don't believe Trump is part of the establishment, because an establishment candidate would keep that information redacted. But I heard the reason they still kept certain information redacted, because if they brought it out at the time, it would imply, it would show the involvement of Central Intelligence agencies. But I want to say on the record, I'm not anti-government, by the way. I think we do need to have a structure a fair balanced structure. I want to put that on the record. So I do respect the good men and women out there. I'm a supporter of Q as well. By the way, I believe it's important to have a fair balanced perspective, by the way. So I'm not bought off or paid off by the mainstream media. By the way, I don't work for CNN, MSNBC, who a lot of times are not going to go over this type of in-depth information because they want to keep a lot of, since they're using melanated people, black people, brown people as pawns nowadays, like on a chessboard. I have to show you guys, like on a chessboard, you know, they're using us as little pawns, by the way. So this is why I'm doing this video. It's important to set the record straight, you know, because I see Facebook has become an echo chamber. One of my relatives, my mom, asked me why I haven't logged in. Is because lately I'm just tired of seeing the propaganda, and they're trying to accuse Mark Zuckerberg of saying he's not doing enough to, on a side note, censor hate speech. But remember, hate speech is speech they don't agree with. So what it is, they want it to be more controlled. That's why these companies or whatever is coming out there boycotting Facebook. This is the interpretation what Yahoo won't tell you, which is filtering through the Associated Press, by the way. Because my relative, she studied communications at Cleveland State, also had another relative that went into communications at Cleveland State, which gets into public relations field, which you can work in fields like human resource, etc. To show you guys, I've done my research, and you can work for news agencies. This gets into journalism. You might get trained depending on which avenue you take, but they're not reporting on the real, going as in depth about this information, while they want to censor Facebook even more so. Facebook already has deplatformed people, which is criminal. There's a whole separate video. There may be antitrust lawsuits coming down the road, by the way, with some of the egregious involvements of the big tech giants as well, have been ganged up with in just deplatforming people without proper due process of law, by the way. And they registered as public utilities, which means like a water company or telephone company years ago, they couldn't discriminate against you based on your political views. They had to provide service, or the electric company. And where it's gotten into, even banks are getting involved in this. These are very egregious crimes being committed, and this definitely needs to be addressed. You know, we're all in the public sphere of the public commons is supposed to be completely equal. Free speech was created, even if you disagree with someone's speech, that's still their freedom of speech to express. It's just you can't do things such as yell fire in a movie theater. I had college instructors, even high school teachers that went over this in terms of your freedom of speech. If you took American government in college, where you learn about the three politics of government, the three bodies between the judicial, legislative, and executive branch. By the way, you can't do things in terms of intimidation and things. When you start getting into violence, that's a different aspect, by the way. But it's still speech. They want to control the speech, the thought police, by the way. That's why I believe the ruling class elite, the Illuminati, the globalists are using the Democratic Party once again to push authoritarianism, socialism, which leads to communism, which historically, when you study your history, don't take my word for what I say, has always failed. Just look at North Korea, what goes on over there, and in China, how they disappear people. They've taken people's organs. I found out they still disappear people. How Tim Cook, people really should be boycotting Apple while they have factories over there, have children tied up to trees, people working beyond 12 hours a day. You know, egregious crimes, not just there, but even in other parts of the world, by the way. So, you know, they pick and choose, people pick and choose who they're going to boycott, by the way. But it's a very complex subject. But the Democratic Party is way more corrupt, in my humble opinion, from my investigation, my research, far more corrupt, and versus the Republican Party out there. Just on a side note, from my research that I've done and from what I've gone over, you can see historically it was the Democratic Party that tried to keep black people, people of color, enslaved. They created the Jim Crow laws. They passed the black codes. They created that. They created the KKK. You know, I could go on, but you know, after this video uploads, you guys can go over it. King also says 1990, blowing the horns. Moneyboy Film says Black Lives Matter is funded by a racist white person. I would say his name, but I'm not going to. Oh yeah, you know, it's already been mentioned. But I would say keep in mind it's other groups as well, and this is not a coincidence, because Antifa, the anti-fascists, they're worldwide, and they were even around when you study the history of Antifa during Hitler's time period. They were used They were even back around that period. By the way, that's how they were able to plan these riots worldwide. By the way, because Antifa is worldwide. By the way, and then different groups, they're starting chapters elsewhere because what these globalists are doing, the Illuminati, the ruling class, they're funding anarchist groups. They're doing this on purpose to, you know, as you already guys saw, they tried to, with the George Floyd thing, it failed, but they still did a lot of damage. It was pre-planned where you have law enforcement coming out and different state governments mentioning they could see that this was a coordinated effort. Not saying that people knew that this was going to happen, what happened with George Floyd, but you can see this is a coordinated attack, a coordinated effort. By the way, it's not a coincidence. I even found bricks outside of my apartment where I stay at, outside my living room window, right behind me. By the way, you know, just sitting there. I haven't notified. I'm going to probably eventually notify the property management, as I do have a relationship with them, and she's does a wonderful job where I stay at. By the way, but you know, this is clearly evident that this is not a coincidence. This just doesn't happen like this. There's been, you know, and there are things, you know, I respect activists. There are things that definitely need to be addressed, that need to be changed to be fair. You know, obviously a man of color, melanated man. I've been through many of these experiences. Me and a friend of mine just spoke earlier. I've been detained before, and things, if I didn't act in a certain manner, I may not have been here by now, or I would be in jail. You know, by the way, me and a coworker used to debate not too long ago. I said, if I took his approach, you know, I would be in jail by now. It is not okay to fight with the police, to resist arrest, fight with the police, get drunk and high, and resist arrest, fight with the police. These are not upstanding members of the community. By the way, I'm gonna be honest with you, not saying that the brother deserved to go that way, the way that he did, but in many cases, these people were not doing as the image is portrayed, painted. They were not upstanding members of the community. I could see the difference with Nipsey Hussle, the rapper. He did things to really change people's lives around. He gave to homeless people. He was an activist. He did things to empower other people. But all of these other situations don't compare. It's not the same comparison, and it's not the same comparison as what happened with George Floyd. So you need to make a distinction. Black people, you need to still maintain your morals, your values, your ethics, and integrity. It's still important. I think you can still address these things that are taking place. I did tell my coworker prior to these things happening that things are changing, and he was even surprised. He, you know, agreed. I said, I can see that through things that happened in the past, but it's important that our people, Black people, are not used as a pawn for their agenda. By the way, that you get a fair, balanced perspective with the true education. So let me get back to the chat. By the way, Gretchen Helm says, yes, at Victor Colin, I think it will forfeit our rights to the land. What you think? Aubrey G.L. Bay says, M.L. King was a Republican Islam. Yes, that's a fact. He was a registered Republican, by the way. Not saying he would have necessarily agreed, because I kind of mentioned this previously. There's, when his birthday or the celebration comes around every year, because it's a national holiday, there's liberals, people that debate. They believe if he was alive to this day, they said they believe he would have been a liberal, but you have to ask the question, which version of Martin Luther King would you have gotten? Because before he was assassinated, remember, he went against the establishment. Oftentimes, a lot of Black nationalists don't talk about this, but you know, right after Martin Luther King won the Nobel Peace Prize, he spoke against the Vietnam War. Lyndon Baines Johnson, who I read about earlier, started calling him the nigger preacher. Excuse my French. That's what he said on record, by the way, unfortunately. And Martin Luther King, he was even quoted, said, I'm afraid I'm leading my people into a burning house, because he woke up to some things, being at the plateau, having a platform that he had during his time period. He did a lot. And that's why I feel specifically, I won't interject, you know, from my personal views from a liberal kind of perspective. Well, I feel we as Black men, you know, have done a lot more. Our ancestors, our uncles have been on the front lines, and a lot of other people come along and get these benefits and still our rights of what belongs to us. You know, with our ancestors died, fought in wars too. They also fought in some of these same wars to keep these freedoms that we have in our modern day society. We could have been taken over by other countries, by the way. People don't, you know, understand that a lot of our own people, melanated people, I have relatives that fought in World War I. You know, explaining this to a friend. So we contributed, we played a major role being on the front lines, but I won't, you know, harp on that, because this video is not about that, but I just want to provide a fair, balanced perspective. And finishing the chat section, Gretchen Helm says, facts, fire, fire. Appreciate you. Digger 420 says, all facts. Digger 420 says, facts. Gerald Jelp says, are the books still available to purchase? By the way, I'm not sure, but I can go over it again. By the way, the few books that I shared, I believe you still might be able to purchase this book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, from Infowars.com. And also check out Alex Jones's other site if you want the real media. You know, not saying I co-sign everything he says, by the way, but look, I listen to everybody, you know, a fair, balanced perspective, you know, from the mainstream media to local media. It's important that you make an assessment, but this is where we'll teach you about the bloodlines and their role historically in those individuals. I won't say the name, who created the Federal Reserve banking system, the central banks in many countries worldwide, and how they colonized, by the way, like in the movie Black Panther. You know, so just do a search online, by the way. This is the author, his photo, by the way. It's called Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Very important book to have in your collection, a must-have, by the way. This other book I went over, my friend who told me this is no longer in print, you might have to do a search. There may be old bookstores. Maybe you may be even able to check. I know some African bookstores or conscious community. I don't know if the Black and Nobel is still around in Philadelphia or if they have websites, but you might have to do a search and see if it's still in stock. There is a PDF version online of one of these books, but I would suggest you want to hurry up because they've tried to ban it. And this is a reason a friend of mine told me why people were mad that Minister Farrakhan spoke at Aretha Franklin's funeral, because he put out these books years ago. A friend of mine told me he was banned from speaking before Congress, because this is an important component because of the Jews. Like when you listen to Yusuf's video he did recently, by the way, with the rules, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. By the way, it's important. Go over those videos. This complements some of the information I'm going over, by the way. And this is why they were mad at the Nation of Islam, and it was their historical research department. Let me mention on record, they got the writings, the artifacts, the information from the Jews, the Caucasian European Jews synagogues, the rabbis, their own teachings that were public, and they published the book. This deals with the Jim Crow laws, how they played a role. This book deals with how Caucasian European Jews owned slave ships. They played a role in the transatlantic slave trade, by the way, in many parts. They try to oftentimes erase that part of the history, and they'll point the finger at other Caucasian races or whatever as the bad guys. Like there's infighting amongst them, like the Italians, you have the Greeks over here, Polish people, and they had separate communities, by the way, in different cities. When you look at the migration patterns where people, geographical locations where people lived at, by the way. But these books help provide evidence. So if they're still out there, you have to just do a research. I recommend check eBay. I don't know if it's still, if it is banned on Amazon. I don't know. I haven't looked it up as of lately. By the way, I can't remember where I purchased them from. I might have got both of these off of eBay. He did a second version, a third and fourth version, but I think these two are most important. This is part one that deals with the transatlantic slave trade, shows you the names of the families, the involvement, the models, the slave ships, how they were involved in commerce and enslaving Black people. This is not a coincidence why today the banking system, when I mentioned that private seminar that I always refer, you hear me guys talk about, that I feel a certain type of way about, that they have a stranglehold over the financial system, which is very cruel. They haven't never passed reparations. So this elder I was speaking with mentioned that back in the 60s, instead of passing these entitlement programs, but Kennedy was trying to do the best that he could. Martin Luther King at the time, a relative told me, my mother told me, the Black Panthers felt Martin Luther King wasn't moving fast enough. But this is when reparations should have been passed, because reparations were passed for Jewish people for something that happened overseas in Germany. They were passed for Japanese Americans, received reparations for Pearl Harbor. There was indigenous Native Americans received reparations. Black people as a whole, melanated people in this country, have never received reparations. So the damage has never been repaired. Now, most likely it won't go anywhere, because I heard it will cost upwards of over 17 trillion, or at least around that amount. Robert Johnson, the guy who started BET, Black Entertainment Television, was one of the first Black billionaires, called for reparations recently after the killing of George Floyd, by the way, just on a side note, in case, for at least 14 trillion. So the amount is up there, and he's worth several billion, by the way. And he's somebody who's actually been an advocate. He's spoken at the White House for the opportunity zones, the positive things that Trump has tried to do for the Black community that oftentimes doesn't get addressed, that is suppressed by the mainstream media. He's even been quoted as far as saying, give Trump a chance. Him and the CEO of Chase Bank, Jamie Dimon, by the way. But many of these things are complex, but just giving this, using this as a reference to go over. But the reason this is important, because the damage that was done historically for 400 years, a lot of what African Americans, melanated people have gone through has never been addressed. And even former President Obama increased the reparations for Jewish people for something that happened overseas. Dr. Boyce Watkins was one of the few people that reported on this, by the way, for Caucasian European Jews, and he could have passed an executive order, and he didn't, even when he had control of the House and the Senate. And I question, why didn't President Obama do enough for Black people? Because a lot of these people are boule. And that's why I went over, again, don't take my word for what I say, but do research. And I actually met him before, William Schnoebelen, by the original book I had. But I'm not trying to hate on President Obama, but why would he increase the reparations? And he was our first Black president in more recent time, by the way, and he did not pass a reparations or executive order for us, by the way. So because there's an epidemic of broken families, divorce, bad parenting in the Black community that BLM needs to address. It is by design. They never wanted Black people as a whole to have economic power. This is why they give foreigners a tax incentive and loans from the banks. It's known historically insurance companies and banks practice discriminatory methods against Black people. By the way, this is a fact. This is why it's not a coincidence. In Detroit, Michigan, which has a high density Black population, insurance companies have practiced discriminatory practices with high car insurance rates for melanated people in this country, and not just in Detroit, but abroad, by the way. So I want to go over once again, I'm not hating on President Obama, but I'm just questioning that he was Black. How come he didn't pass an executive order when we needed reparations to repair the damage that was done? Because our people inherited poverty. Since lots of our people, lots of other nationalities were enriched by our labor, and some of our Black people are afraid to step up and ask this question, why didn't Obama do more to help Black people? When he was president, he had a chance. He could have passed an executive order. This was mentioned to me by two people, one was a 5-star historian, the other was a friend of mine who had a secret security clearance and studied political science and economics, by the way. So he had the credentials. And, you know, when I hear all this talk I heard last year, so that's one of the things I support. I'm in agreements, you know, but many Black people voted for him, but they don't hold him accountable. That's the sad part. And that's how they manipulate and easily use a lot of our people as pawns, too, by the way. Just refocus. So I'm gonna get back in the chat. Looks like I'm losing some of the lighting. I'm gonna try to get more lighting in here. Okay, appreciate you guys for bearing with me so far. I'm gonna finish up with the chat. I'm probably gonna shut things down. I was supposed to have a meeting. I'm gonna be a little late too. By the way, I'm getting a glare. Okay. Okay, let me get back to the chat section. Okay, let me scroll back up. Yes. Okay. A lot of you guys have jumped in, chimed in. Okay, let me find the last part where I read from currency. Are you saying that you are down for? Okay, Marilyn Campbell asked earlier, she said, are you saying that you're down for a Republican? I feel like overall, this is my argument. You can go back and watch my older videos, Marilyn, to answer your question from earlier. I felt like they were the lesser of two evils. But a lot of these issues, things I'm going over in this video, you go back over and dissect it, is not being addressed by the Democratic Party, the mainstream and the liberal mainstream media, which is 95%, 98% liberal, along with the big tech companies that own a lot of the mainstream media sites. By the way, Spoon and Fork says, "What's up, man? Appreciate you." Currency 365 says, "What's up, man?" Once again, I don't think I read that part earlier. Big shout out to you once again, Currency 365. Appreciate the super chat. Carlene McLean says, "High vibes, Dorsey's Resource, high vibes to all the originals in the chat." Thanks, Gretchen Helm. All the Aboriginal, thank you. So yeah, so to answer Jiro's question, yes, I will do a manual search on those books, by the way. Just look those books up online. Yahoo, Google, whatever search engine into your liking, DuckDuckGo, Yahoo, Google, Bing, whatever. Gretchen Hill says, "Peace, love, and honor, high vibes, Currency 365. That's what's up." He said he will get back to the chat in a few. Princess Daniel said, "My dad side is in Masonry and Eastern Star. I asked my granny before she passed away, could I join the Eastern Star? She said, no, keep reading your Bible like I taught you. Now I understand why." Yeah, I hope, thank you, Princess Daniel, for sharing that story. Hopefully I can help wake others up. You know, and that's like a whole separate video. There's some other things I can go into because I do have some separate notes. Someone I was discussing, by the way, who's in a different state. I won't say her name, but it's good when I have other sources sharing powerful, high-powered information with myself. Carlene McLean says, "Yep." Princess Daniel says, "Where's this info, brother, so I can read and take my notes? Thanks, thank you kindly." Oh, to answer your question, shoot me an email and I'll give you, I'll send the link to you. Just put your question in the email. This is for you, Princess, to answer your question. My email address is letter J, as in John, 279 dorsey@gmail.com. DORSEY, J279 Dorsey, D as in Delta, O as in Oscar, R as in Roberto, S as in Sam, E as in Edward, Y as in Yolanda, J279 Dorsey@gmail.com. For serious inquiries only, this is to address the question that Princess Daniels had, by the way, and I'll send the link to you. Just remind me, make sure you shoot me an email, by the way. Gretchen Hill, Princess Daniels says, "Thank you, G. Remember the topic and Princess Daniels because he will come back to the chat. Dorsey's research is on point. Kev Gills covers this, but differently." Princess Daniels says, "Okay, we'll try." Gretchen says, "Right at Carlin McLean. Lyndon Bay, LBJ, war on poverty, fire." Yes. Trump nationalized the Fed Reserve, so Democrats are going crazy. Yes, I also heard something was done with the Treasury, by the way. Send it Loach in the chat. Peace to you, Chris. Trump nationalized the Fed to obtain sovereign immunity for USA, for the Republic. Yes, you're correct. Kudos to you all that have done your homework and your research, by the way, for confirmation, as I'm reading from the chat section. Carlene McLean says, "Yep, never a democratic country." Moneyboy Film says, "What's up, Chris?" Send it Low says, "What up?" Gretchen Helm says, "Yup." Carlene McLean said, "Okay, explosive. Okay, appreciate you." Princess Daniel says, "Straight facts." Gretchen Helm says, "You need a moderator in the chat at Dorsey's Resource Fire." Appreciate you. Maybe down the road, you know, if my platform expands or gets, you know, larger, I would definitely consider that. You know, if you're interested, or, you know, share me information. I'm not familiar with how that works. I've looked at other big channels. Some of you guys have seen me on other big channels, like Yusuf has a big following, Currency 365, by the way. Kudos to once again, and many others out there as well. So I haven't had any trolls lately. By the way, I have addressed that issue. So you guys have been good so far. I appreciate you. I do try to be fair, by the way, and even will leave the comments up, by the way. So after this video is uploaded, you guys are welcome to leave a comment. Moneyboy Film says, "Yes, I believe we need a new structure. I am not against certain things." Yes, by the way, it's a complex subject, so it's not a perfect situation, by the way. Princess Daniel says, "Yes, I play chess, not checkers." Carlene McLean says, "Exactly." Moneyboy Film says, "Facts." Gretchen Hill says at Dorsey's Resource, just wondering how you identify, if you would like to share. Okay, that's a real good question. I try to stay away from labels, Gretchen. So I also, because I have to get into consensus reality. By the way, Jordan Maxwell explained this years ago, where if a majority of people believe that an apple is an orange, and that's what they believe, but you understand it's really an apple, or from your interpretation, it's something else. So that's why I'll still use the word Black, African American, but I like to also use melanated, by the way. And Moore was also used to depict people of color, by the way. And I would have to do a whole separate video. I do have documentation with me from a site that was taken down, by the way. I don't know if you guys can see, by the way. This was actual site I had taken notes from. I printed out some years ago that talked about the history. This is also a copy from the Black's Law Dictionary I showed earlier, the Dred Scott case. So it has been documented on record. They even mentioned it in this Martin Lawrence film called The Black Knight or something like that. The guy called him a Moor in that movie. They give like cryptic messages you'll find rarely in different pieces. So that was actually because black and white is just description. It doesn't depict the true nationality. Now, I'm not a member of the Moorish Science Temple, by the way. I'm not a member of any organizations or groups. I'm not part of the Nubians. I'm not Nation of Islam. I'm not a Hebrew Israelite. But however, I've studied in different disciplines and with other people. I have friends or people that I know that are part of some of these groups that I study with. And just in general, anybody can do their own research and homework and find out facts and data. Doesn't mean you always have to belong or be officially part of an organization to have knowledge. By the way, that's why I'm doing these videos, to empower you all as well. So very good question, Gretchen. I would probably have to go, more in depth with, because that would get into a separate video where I'll have to show evidence how that plays a part in the redemption movement and indigenous people, by the way. Just like you have different indigenous groups that are recognized, Cherokees, different Native Americans, Apaches, Navajo, Yamasee, different Creek nations, by the way. Raleen M says, it does not matter if the person was not an upscale person. The police are supposed to be better than criminal. Okay, I get with where you're coming from in a sense, but the point that I was making, Raleen M, earlier about is times are changing, and it's great, to see change and things happening. But what I was when I had a conversation with a coworker some time ago about, just because the mainstream media is also pushing a narrative, as many can agree with, programming people, I don't think, in my best judgment, it's good, in the good judgment, to fight with the police, to resist arrest, to fight with the police, to get DUIs. Because if there was a family out there that this individual had harmed or killed, and I see this on the news all the time with 1-800 Crime Stoppers, Black families, when they've had loved ones that have been brutally murdered or harmed, and they don't know who the person is, even in hit and runs, and the person may have been drunk, there would have been this big uproar, cry. So don't compare these same situations, is what I'm saying, to George Floyd or what the rapper Nipsey Hussle did. These are different comparisons. He gave to homeless people. He did other activist things in his own regard. Nipsey, the rapper, and George Floyd, he didn't deserve to go. Of course, many law enforcement officers were able to agree. So I'm not saying that the person has to be upscale. There is a caste system. That's a whole separate topic, by the way. So I wasn't implying that at all, but just understand, to kind of explain your remark from the chat section, what I'm going over. Marilyn Campbell says, I'm done with listening to you because police have been framing and killing people of color since way back in the day. Okay, that's fine. I do understand. However, did you know it was a Chicago police officer recently that saved 2 people? By the way, you can look up the story in a lake. So you have to weigh things, the good versus the bad, like anything in life, different disciplines, different career fields. There's good and bad. Just like you've had, this hasn't been talked about. There was a doctor that was arrested in Ohio not too long ago that murdered a bunch of people. Did you guys remember that? And there was even situations, a nurse down in Texas some years ago, there was a historical case where she was killing and murdering a bunch of infants. This is way more than the number of people that were killed by the police last year. So you see how the mainstream media picks and chooses what they want to focus on. I just found out information with this COVID thing. There's people and nurses and doctors in hospitals, not all, that are going along with killing people, pushing the incubators, the tubes to destroy healthy people's lungs so they die. By the way, there's a lot of things. So you guys don't be brainwashed. Don't take my word for what I say. Research the information in depth, by the way. Please do your research and go in depth, microscopically, meticulously, by the way. I don't have ties to either political party. I'm just showing you the other side that is oftentimes not mentioned by the mainstream media, liberal media, Democrats, by the way, which there needs to be a fair, balanced perspective. And I had people come to me and say, thank you, Dorsey, for mentioning the other side of what they don't talk about. And those of you all out there, if you agree with what I'm saying overall, let's get the thumbs up, by the way, too, by the way, because it lets the haters and the trolls know you agree with me overall. At the end of the video, after it's finished uploading, feel free to leave a comment. You know, if there's something, a topic you would like me to cover, or something, a question that didn't get answered from a previous video or whatever, let me know. But let's get the thumbs up. By the way, appreciate it. It helps me rank higher in the search results. If you want to see me go to the next level or cover some of these hard, tough topics, it helps out tremendously. See if I can get better lighting in here, by the way. Oh, I said this before. Okay, so you guys can see me clearer. Maybe it seemed like the light back there was, the shadow was kind of interfering because I saw myself as a shadow, by the way. So I'm gonna get finished. I'm gonna finish reading the chat before I wrap things up, guys. Appreciate you all for joining as well. Okay, yes, Gretchen says, Marilyn Campbell said, I will never be Uncle Tom. Gretchen Helm says, right, listen, observe, and make your own analysis of the information. Thank you. Kudos to you. Carlene McLean says, restitution, the only solution. Yes, I'm in agreement of. Chris Sendet said, learn who Uncle Tom really was. Shake my head. You're right. You'll never be an Uncle Tom. Yep. Thank you, Chris, for clarifying that. Appreciate you. James Way, name of the book, please. Okay. Let me see. It's jumping down. A lot of you guys are jumping in. I don't know how many we have. Trying to wrap things up. I'm gonna try to get to everybody if I can. By the way, it looks like a lot more people have jumped in. I'm having trouble keeping up. I was supposed to be due up at a meeting soon. I may have to actually postpone it to another day, but I appreciate each and every one of you guys for joining. By the way, I'm just going over. Okay, Gretchen Helm says, facts. He woke up to understand that this is our land and we're coming to get our check. Okay, fire. Kathleen says, yes, sister, I will never be. Okay, I read that part. Listen, observe, make your own analysis of information. Okay, I read that part. Name of the book, please. The name of the book, James Way, I went over. It was actually several books. The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Part 1 and 2. I showed. Right here, to answer your question. These were the main two books. The other book was Bloodlines of the Illuminati by Fritz Springmeier. I had to buy this off of eBay, repurchase this some years ago because the original version I had was not given back to me. But this explains some things, by the way. It's public information. It's not hidden, by the way. Okay, and that'll be, so hopefully you guys get the information on the book so far. If not, you can go back and watch the beginning of the video once this finished uploads. I went over a ton of information, by the way, related to the other side of the Democratic Party, what they're not telling you, by the way. James Way says, name of the book, please. Okay, I answered that because we're on our land. Don't. Chris Sendet says 17 trillion is chump change on a grand scale. Yes, that's in terms of if they pass reparations, that they're trying to fund it as a whole. I heard they did some videos I actually downloaded. I have where they had a discussion. Remember, this was in talks last year around the time of Juneteenth. That was going on while there was also hearings with the tech companies that lied before Congress about that search engine Dragonfly. They also had hearings about the reparations, and they said it was estimated. One group, lady from Yahoo, I can't remember the name. I may have saved the article, but it was estimated to be around, the cost of it would cost 17 trillion, just like with these stimulus proposals. You know, when they go over the cost of the CARES Act and the HEROES Act, this is funding behind that. But this elder was telling me back in the 60s, had they addressed the issue at that time, they never repaired the damage. And he was explaining to me they should have addressed the issue during this time period. And because they did not do that, they did Black people really wrong in this country, melanated people. I do agree with that aspect. But it's the manipulation of the left I'm explaining to be very careful of. But this explains why you do have some of the racial tensions and things, because they gave reparations to Jews, Caucasian Jews, which Obama actually increased, by the way. They gave reparations to Japanese Americans for Pearl Harbor, also Native Americans and other groups. I heard, check Dr. Claude Anderson's work. And he said that Trump's White House communicated. Obama just ignored his proposals, by the way. So at least they were willing to hear what he had to say. That shows you a big difference. And kind of, you go over the history of what I went over early in this video, by the way. Oftentimes, you won't get this information from the mainstream media. Victor Coleman says, if Trump honors reparations, now is the perfect time since the Fed is printing infinite. Yeah, it would be nice, though. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but you know, I'm in agreements with it. But I was kind of going over the cost and, you know, historically why it should have been passed back in the 60s, and because the Civil Rights Bill, those government programs are designed to run out of money. They're designed to run out of funding, the entitlement programs, by the way, and that's the problem. These other groups, the damage was repaired, but they used our people once again, like in chess, as pawns. And Yusuf even said he's tired of seeing our people being used as pawns. So I felt it's important for me to mention the facts of why I'm doing this video. I even postponed my meeting I was supposed to be at earlier to get some very important information, because I'm tired of seeing the propaganda, the echo chamber from many of my relatives, liberal relatives on Facebook, etc. And one in particular seems like trying to convert me to the other side. If I was to become a registered voter again, which I'm not, I would no doubt vote for Trump. And I feel like he's the lesser of two evils. It doesn't mean that I co-sign everything that he says or does. This does not mean that. But in evaluating, when you study the real history and what's going on overall and weighing the lesser of two evils, by the way, you'll find out. And the reason Justice Robert in that vote recently, I think, was the swing vote. Remember, a lot of people don't know about this, but under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and the gay marriage, he was one of the justices that was threatened. I heard his family members were threatened behind the scenes, Justice Roberts. So I can understand where he's coming from. Just to give you guys a little back screen, I'm not touching on that subject, that topic, because that's a, you know, sensitive area, even for someone like myself, and it's complex too, by the way. But I think the reason why it didn't go in Trump's favor, a lot of people may not be aware of, they murdered Justice Scalia, Antonin Scalia, by the way, under Obama's administration. I don't think that was a coincidence. And Justice Roberts was threatened, and also Clarence Thomas, his wife. I found out from doing the research, I didn't even know his wife was part of the Tea Party at one time, the only Black Supreme Court justice. So it's a reason why they're caving in, because this, as I read earlier, the Democrats, they use bully tactics. They want everybody enslaved on entitlement programs overall. These are benefit privileges, by the way, contractually. When you get into the forms of the contracts basis, when you get really deep into the funding of this sort. But I trust the conservative Republican Party more so than the Democratic Party, which is being used by the ruling class elite. The globalists also in the UK, which is there for nationalism versus globalism. Globalism is the New World Order, Agenda 21, that's disguised under the Green Movement, by the way, which is nothing green about it. By the way, they want to charge us for the air we breathe. If they're able to fully accomplish this, they would want to be the people at the top. They would be exempt from it, like the Ocasio-Cortezes, the other people, if they were to get these agendas passed through, they will use these tactics like the movie Total Recall years ago. They eventually want to charge people for the air we breathe. That's why under the Green Movement, there's this talk about, and it's connected to Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development, because this is another trick that the globalists want to eventually get rid of currency altogether. They're not only moving us to digital, but they want to get rid of currency altogether and have something what's called a carbon tax, carbon credits. That's why the new smart devices, smart televisions, by the way, would be designed to spy on you, to report, like when you're using your refrigerator, if you're getting out certain items, where the new refrigerators would recommend you would put certain items in certain locations so they could, or may even be installed with a camera to covertly see what you're eating, what your calorie intake is, like these Fitbit. Google just bought Fitbit, by the way, because they want, this is about tracking you, a technocracy, by the way. Even with this COVID thing, this contact tracing, they want the vaccines down the road to be chipped in people, and they want to have this dye that can track the specific chips, the markers that go inside people, by the way. I saw that the documents Alex Jones from Band.video, his site, check it out, reported on it. There was also a whistleblower nurse who came out where she went undercover. This is newer information on their site, by the way. If you want to check that out, go to Band.video. In the previous videos, I posted it in the description box below the video. In a couple of my most recent videos, I posted the link. Very powerful video. I will try to download it if I can. He has a download link to allow you to download. Go to Band.video. You may have to scroll down some, but a nurse came out as a whistleblower. She went undercover. She also worked overseas. So we've had whistleblowers, people that have come out. So the information I'm going over is factual. This is not conspiracy theory. As you notice how Yahoo News or whatever will try to put out a message, like they're always trying to convince you, the opposing side, to say it's a conspiracy behind George Soros. No, this is a fact. I actually have a friend who is from down south. I won't say which city. That his brother, he showed me George Soros's website, Open Society Foundation, some years ago. He took me to the site. I was on the phone with him and showed me his brother's name. It was inactive at the time, but showed me, and his other brother that found out was up hard at the time, prior when he found out about it, because his brother had received funding from him. So this stuff is real. This is not even, it just may be in more modern day society. When I heard they asked Soros recently, he could be using his son, Alexander Soros, or it's also other groups, as I mentioned earlier, that are funding some of these anarchist groups. And so under the disguise of activism, by the way, which police departments all wear across the country, this is a plot to overthrow the country. By the way, this is not a coincidence. By the way, you have to say, does the ends justify the means? By the way, I went over earlier how Lisa Haven did a video on her YouTube channel. This was a while ago, when Trump before he had become president, when he was trying to do a rally in the Chicago area. During his campaign, the Chicago police had to shut down a rally because the Clinton Foundation, these documents she showed, was paid for had funded these so-called protesters on a bus and had given them alcohol and drugs and other things intentionally. These buses that were coming in, and this was also reported on by other outlets from previous protests and things. I'm not saying everybody who is involved is connected to Soros, however, or has, some people do have genuine intent, because there are genuine grievances. I do understand that. Actually, things I've gone through, I do understand your pain, your frustration. I was pulled over earlier this year, back in January, by Oak Park Police. You know what I did? I complied. Even prior to that, before the year ended, before the holiday, before Christmas, you know, I didn't try to be combative, like I was having a debate with the coworker. That's one of the things you do not want to do, ever do. You want to be polite, say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. If you never had, I had my elders years ago, fortunately, had good parents, mentors that went over with me what to do if you're pulled over by the police. So I do empathize. I do understand your frustration. It's not like I don't know. So just don't assume, you know, these types of things, but I encourage you to do your research and investigate very in depth. A lot of our people are being used as pawns. By the way, like I showed in the chessboard, you know, this piece right here, pawns. So I'm going to get back to the chat once again. It says, if they generate and print own money and give trillions to banks, surely can do the same for people of color. Yes, I'm in agreements with you on that. Raleen, I am in agreements. Victor Collins says, Dorsey, I've said that to my friends, but they say he was the president of the USA, not black folks. I understand. Just, this is why I'm doing this video, because unfortunately, a lot of our people and people in general, they're not educated. And I went over after this video uploads, it's important to go over the information that I went over, by the way. And you can do your own research behind. You can type in the phrases that I mentioned, the quotes, and you will find out. Don't take my word for what I say. So I do understand your frustration, Victor. It's no problem. There's people who will, and a lot of people have woken up and have left, by the way. It's not perfect. Politics, that's why I really generally don't get into politics. I'm personally, once again, the reason I repeat this, I'm not connected to either political party. I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I'm not a registered voter, and I have for good reasons. I'm in a different category too, by the way. I attended an event with members of the ruling class elite, members of the private sector, very elite people some years ago, by the way. It would be like the equivalent of Bilderberg. So I'm in a different category. I'm trying to go towards a different goal. Not that I'm not trying to enslave people. Let me say that on record. I just want to be private. I wanted to get access to my funding a long time ago. I wouldn't have never gone public, by the way. It was a friend of mine that encouraged me to, by the way, because many people are afraid. They're afraid to show their faces. That's why you have a lot of trolls out here. You have to ask the question, if people want you to believe that their facts matter or information, or they're giving you real facts, why are they always hiding behind a fake account? They're never showing a real face or a real name. They're using a pseudonym, So money, Karen, Carlene McLean says money is worthless. They can devalue it tomorrow. Riches are to land. We are the land. Gretchen Helm says big difference. Gretchen Helm says, yep, J279 Dorsey at gmail.com. Yes, you're correct. Okay, let me put show. Okay. Gerald Jokes says, thank you, brother. Cynic Loach says, Obama despises black people. He was only there to enrich his satanic brethren. Yes, I have a friend that went more in depth that studied political science, because it can make it seem like I'm just attacking him, and I don't want to make it seem like that. But I questioned earlier something that I read from. I was questioning. I'm not hating on Obama because I'm black just like he is, melanated. But what I asked the question is, why didn't he do more for black people? Why didn't he pass an executive order where we needed reparations to repair the damage? He could have done this. He even went as far as to increase reparations for the Caucasian, European, Jewish community for something that happened overseas in Germany from years ago. Second time, he increased it. So that shows you, he should have done more, in my opinion, in that regard, because there's still a major issue in the black community of high poverty rates, etc. And that's all I'll kind of leave it at. But thank you, Loach, for confirming. So I'm not the only person that's putting out there. I do have a friend. He mentioned about a book that he read when Obama was a student at Hawaii some years ago as a child. I don't know too much about that. He despised one of his black classmates, or one of his only classmates in his class that he was on the basketball team with. He didn't. But he changed years later, and he went under the name. He was using the name Barry Sotoro, by the way. That information is true. Sheriff Joe Arpaio out west, they did a full investigation dealing with the birther thing. And I want to say on the record, that wasn't Trump who came up with that. When Hillary Clinton was running against Obama in 2008, it was her and John McCain's camp that paid a private investigator to get that information. It's just Trump ran with after that, by the way. So they were the original ones. You know how it was infighting, as I addressed that earlier. And also, Hillary Clinton colluded with former Governor Jennifer Granholm to keep Barack Obama and John Edwards' name off the ballot at the time. He won that nomination in 2008 in a landslide, when he was still behind earlier on, as they're deciding when I heard they went to the Bilderberg meeting where they decided that Obama would be president, Hillary Clinton would be Secretary of State. I heard the Rothschild family wanted Hillary Clinton, but the Rockefeller family, since they ran the United States, they wanted Obama. Since these are bloodline families you can read about in this book that I went over. By the way, you can look this up and read. That's why it's important to know your history and what I'm going over. Facts, straight facts. So going back to the chat, Gretchen Helm says facts, fire. Gretchen Helm says social constructs, you're right. Carlene McLean says black and white socio-political constructs. Yes, Gretchen Helm says right. Chris says constructs. Okay, this jumped up. Carlene, me too. Gretchen, until he started caping for Mossad. I don't say, okay, da 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 da. Okay, this jumped down big time. Okay, know what? Okay, a lot of you guys are in here. I'm losing. Kind of lost where I was at. But I'm trying to get to all you guys. But I'm trying to read all you guys' comments so I can try to shut things down or get ready to. So I'm not trying to get political, guys. This is a complex subject. But however, I had to get this off my chest. I had to address this, by the way. And that's why I titled this video a certain way. By the way, Gerald Joe says, thank you, brother. Obama, despite, okay, I read that already. Facts, facts, facts. Black and white social bright constructs that you, Loach says, constructs that you voluntary contract with and accept everything is contract. Gretchen Helm says, good point about the police, but they discriminate slightly at best based on perceived character. Wouldn't you say not to say it's right? Yes, absolutely. I'm in agreement with you. You know, you guys are still right. I'm not saying you're wrong. You know, we can agree to disagree sometimes the way we say things, but I agree with that as well. There's many different angles, aspects to look at this from. Carlene McLean says, yes, all contracts indeed. Victor Collins says, thumbs up, appreciate you. Anita A says, hey, thank you for joining. Anita, greetings to you. Lope says, I have no problems with the police because I pulled jurisdiction from them through contractual redress, do not detain. Okay, excellent. Some people haven't got to that level yet. One of the starts is one of the things that's a big contradiction. Check Enlightened Luciferian's video about the voter registration. Some of these things, check what he says in the very beginning, by the way, and how, you know, it's a very complex subject, but how that's even tied directly into, you know, some of the stuff that goes on with the police and their database they have. You know, Darren Jackson says, you're doing a great job. Appreciate you, Darren Jackson, for staying with me, guys. This is a very, you know, I understand it's a touchy subject, but I'm just mentioning the other side that you won't hear it have MSNBC, CNN won't discuss. Roland Martin, who I listen to sometimes, Al Sharpton, MSNBC, or Michael Eric Dyson, by the way, because you've heard even comments, you know, all type of comments to say that you're not black and this, that, and the other. But people have different experiences. We all are born with different personalities. Many people live in different demographics. So I'm addressing these things. But they remember the Democratic Party, they want to control the narrative. They want absolute power. They want to be at the top. Remember, there's a saying, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. So understand that they're power driven. When Lindsey Graham mentioned during the Kavanaugh hearings, it wasn't about the Christine Blasey Ford. He said, this is about, he said, you all want power and I hope you all never get it. That's what it's about. They want to be the ones on top. It's not that they necessarily always care about the people. The Democrats, they have known for way more corruption with stealing money and things and of that sort versus the Republican Party. You do have corruption on both sides, but the Democrats has been very egregious misconduct across the board. And remember from the history that I read, they fought to keep black people enslaved historically. It was the Republicans were the abolitionists that fought to end slavery. The Democrats started the KKK. They created the Jim Crow laws. They created the black codes. I went over that already. It was the Democrats historically. They used the entitlement programs, which I read earlier. If you go to once this video after it uploads, it's going to be pretty long. But I'm just going over this so you guys get the facts, the real information. Carlene McLean says, I'm a lady, laugh out loud. Okay. Nine Ether Acapulco says, good info, bro. The ancient ones are rising. Princess Daniel says, yes, we are either. Okay. It's kind of hard to disagree with how clear and meticulous your research is. Some folks don't know how to put pride aside for a minute and learn something. Yeah, I understand. You know, as I discussed with the elder, one thing I like, one of the elders I know, he's a humble person. I'm humble. He admits, even just because he's older, he can learn something from an older person. And I'm humble enough. We have to put our egos aside sometimes. And you can get wisdom sometimes. Well, wisdom is a combination of not only intelligence, but experience that you've gotten. So sometimes it's good to try to remain humble. And I say we can agree to disagree sometimes. And it's one of the videos I've been meaning to do this for a while. And there's another video I have notes already compiled for a screen capture video as well, where I can go more in depth, where you guys can see where I was reading from as well. So thank you for that comment, Victor. I appreciate you. Carlene McLean says, ninth honor warrior. Honor, Colleen McLean. Gretchen Helm says, honor, peace, loves emoji, fire, fire. Appreciate you. Thanks for the invite, Gretchen Helm. Honor, Empress. You're welcome. Okay, Princess Daniel says, show me the land, then send the check. The hashtag Homestead Active 2020, 9 Ether. Okay, show me the land, then the check. Okay. Princess Daniel says, agree, 9 Ether. They also gave reparations to so-called slaveholders for the loss of workers in 1865. Wow. Wouldn't doubt it. This message is held for review. This explains to divide. I'll show, click show. So I'm just now getting to you guys. I'm going to have to wrap things up, guys. So I'm going to scroll to the end and let you know this is going to be the last call. By the way, this was Q&A as well. Before I shut things down, I'm going to click show. I'm going to click show because it's asking me in here. I'm going to try to scroll back up. So bear with me. The last comment I'm taking is Gerald. By the way, I'm going to jump back up because I got to get ready to go, guys. I postponed a meeting, an important meeting I was supposed to go to, by the way. Okay, jumping back up. This explains the divide to a point. We are owed so much more for our land. Okay, thank you, Gretchen. Princess Daniel said, you sure will not YouTube educate more than their schools. You sure will not YouTube educate more than their YouTube. You will not. Okay, Princess Daniel said, you sure will not YouTube educate more than their schools. Okay, I'm not sure how you, if you were trying to say I'm giving more information in the general school system. 9 Ether says honor at Princess Daniels. Gretchen Helm says facts, fire, fire. Princess Daniels says straight facts. Princess Daniels says he was also a MF pawn. Princess Daniels, straight facts. So some of this might pertain to what I was going over earlier as I'm catching up with the chat section, guys. If you're wondering some of the comments in here, I'm just now getting to you guys, but I'm trying to read all the chats, as many as I can. Straight facts, they murdered them all. Yep. When I was referring to the activists earlier. Yep, they were trying to coup and still are. Coincidence? I think not. Fire. Nothing is a coincidence. Princess Daniel says Dr. Sebi, Dick Gregory, and much more is part of the agenda, period. Princess Daniel says straight facts at Jim. Okay. Forgive me if I'm not pronouncing the name. I'm doing my level best, guys. Carlene McLean says you can buy canned air now. That's funny. Speak at Carlene. Let's not get on the serum gas, the oil lines, the diamonds, the sweatshops, etc. Yeah, there was a movie called Blood Diamond some years ago. It's a good movie. Also check out Hotel Rwanda with Don Cheadle. What's funny is a lot of actors that play in a lot of these movies, they actually support the opposite. Many of them, keep in mind, if they are like the actor Sean Penn in Hollywood, if they go against the grain, they will have their funding and advertisers and stuff like that cut when they speak truth to power. But still, the movies are good depictions sometimes of what can actually occur and what has happened overseas, by the way, dealing with the colonizing and the things that, you know, when I went over briefly about the Federal Reserve, how they go in other places and take the resources and things of that sort. Carlene McLean says exactly, sis. Princess Daniel says yoga breathing techniques is very important to learn. Also study meditation. Yes, that's important. Gretchen Helm says, I saw that on an Aboriginal channel or Citizen Man. Ninth Ether says Trump is against globalism and he is also trying to get rid of the Federal Reserve. His last two nominees, Judy Shelton and Chris Waller, both agreed that gold-backed U.S. dollars are the way to go. Yes, agreements. WikiLeaks gave out a lot of this 2 years ago, or so ago. Yes, it's important to give credit to Julian Assange. He did a major work. Also, Eric Snowden, by the way. Kudos to those guys for the work they put in. Also, rest in peace to Aaron Swartz, by the way, the work that he put in with the IT community, by the way, with the white hats, the good guys, dealing with the IT information technology. Aaron Swartz, you can look up, they made a movie, went across the country called The Internet's Own Boy. So kudos to not only Julian Assange, special shout out to Eric Snowden and Aaron Swartz for the work they've done. Appreciate you guys. Everybody's been on the front lines of awakening truth. We're all in this together. Look at the Georgia Guidestones. They want to get rid of a lot of the world's population. So another aspect, there was even an album that Tupac did where he said black and white doesn't matter. And another aspect or angle to look at it, but check out the Georgia Guidestones. They're actually guarded now by private security, I heard, and cameras because somebody vandalized them. But they put on there, they want to decrease a significant portion of the world's population, by the way. So something to keep in mind. Says, I don't say much. Carlene McLean says, I don't say much, but I'm hip to a lot of the BS. I think my phone was tapped. I watched Gary Webb so much, the former journal. Oh, yeah, I forgot about, yep, Gary Webb. They did a movie on him called Kill the Messenger. That was a movie on Gary Webb. The movie on Aaron Swartz some years ago was called The Internet's Own Boy. Both films were released at certain theaters across the country. So they did come out in certain places, by the way. So rest in peace to Gary Webb. He was also on Montel Williams' show many years ago. He was trying to expose this. He was murdered, by the way, just like Pat Tillman was murdered for exposing the drug opium fields going on in Afghanistan, by the way, who's a former football player and Marine. I heard murdered by some of his own Marine buddies. You know, that was a deep state job. Sadly, by the way, rest in peace to these pioneers, people who have lost their lives sharing. So to show you, to be fair, trying to look at race. It's not always about race. They want to murder a lot of people, the Illuminati, the globalists, the ruling class elite, by the way. So getting back to the chat, I read that comment. Carlene McLean says, me too, Gretchen, until he started caping for Mossad. Facts, Ninth Ether. That's why they trying to get rid of his ass. Okay. Victor Collins says, I'm in agreements with you 100%. I'm not frustrated at all, bro. Appreciate you, Victor. Carlene McLean says, all skin ain't kin. He was loyal to his European heritage. By the way, okay, I'm not sure who you're referring to. Again, I've heard that quote before, but let me know who you're referring to if you're still listening, Carlene. By the way, who you're talking? Oh, I think. Oh, you must be talking about Obama. Okay, got you. Well, appreciate your comment, Carlene. Says Senator Loach says, why didn't Obama do more for Black people? As if he did anything for Blacks, he did nothing for Black people. Thank you for your comment. Not that I'm in disagreements with. Very, can get complex in this aspect, but I already kind of went over what I went over. Gretchen Helm says, facts, fire. Man, I'm learning from you, and I am 63. Okay, appreciate it. Like it's a give and take thing. Gerald Princess Daniel says, yes. Carlene McLean says, never too late if you keep an open mind. Me and my 62. Gerald G says, you are not the only one waking up to information. A lot of things were not taught in their schools. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. Colleen McLean says, laugh out loud. You my big sister. Princess Daniel says, shorthand is my thing. Laugh out loud. Yeah, there's an actor now that from the 80s kind of running from the Hollywood weird. Can't remember his name. I'm almost sure everyone, big sister, laugh out loud. Gretchen's sister. Princess Daniel says, Eric Snowden. Yes, Carlene says, Yes, for real heroes. Gretchen says him facts. Yep. Princess Daniels 2.5 trillion they want dead. Princess Daniels says kill the messenger. Princess Daniels says yup. On there was a new Gary Webb that's who I was watching. Okay, I'm not familiar with who that is, unless you're talking about the actor that played in that movie. Gretchen Hill says I saw the encryption on the Georgia Guidestones. Wow. Yep. There's a channel that I follow. Not saying I always co-sign or agree, but I follow other big YouTubers. She's out of the Chicago area. Her channel is called Nyla Says. And a while ago, she addressed some of these issues, being right in the area geographically. So there's other people that have spoken out independently as activists and shared real information that the mainstream media won't cover or talk about. And she brought some of these things up, by the way. Her husband, Taz, he has a following too as well, separately. Taz Exclusives, I think is the name of his channel. It's pretty hardcore, for you guys. But I follow a lot of different, YouTubers out there, by the way. A lot of other content creators. You have some amazing, talented people out there. I want to give credit to where credit is due. So I'm not a know-it-all. I don't know everything. I appreciate you guys joining me, by the way. And I'll try to, work on coming to you guys more during the day versus when I'm at work at the plantation. You guys see me at night quite a bit. So I can get into answering more questions and things. Princess Daniel says, yep. Oh, there was a new gear. Okay, I read that comment. I saw the inscription on the Georgia Guidestones. Okay, I read that. Carlene McLean says, yep. Dyer Ninth Ether says, great book is Where Do We Go From Here? It was MLK's last book, a must read. Okay, thank you for that information. Carlene McLean says Obama. Carlene McLean says, yup. Morris Lives Matter. Hey, Gretchen Hill. Okay. Ninth Ether. Okay, guys, that's my time. I appreciate you. I've gone over 2 hours. This is the longest so far I've ever done a video, by the way. So I'm getting ready to shut it down. Gretchen Hill says, peace, live in honor. Morris Lives Matter. Thank you, guys. It's much love to you. Thank you all for your time. Who went over, who chatted along, commented along with the chat section. Appreciate you. Appreciate the wonderful feedback, the comments. Gretchen Hill says love. Carlene McLean says thank you. Great info. Appreciate you guys as usual. You can follow me. I'm on Facebook at Dorsey's Resource. There's 2 different channels I have. I'm also on Twitter at Dorsey's Resource, my Twitter handle. I'm also on Instagram, Dorsey's Resource _2019, by the way. Show another side of me, by the way, versus my Twitter handle. Kind of like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, but I wanted to kind of bring some light to this, this subject with a lot of the stuff you guys see that's been going on in the news where they're not covering. So with that being said, I'm your host, John Dorsey. That's my government name, actually, to be more specific, the third. By the way, my government slave name. I do have an indigenous name. I won't say, by the way, for the time being, a lawful name correction I did some years ago. Appreciate you guys for joining me. By the way, once again, please like, share, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for reminding me, Gretchen. And I'm going to be out. And deuces to you guys. Stay blessed, everyone. Shalom. Arrivo Dirty. Adios. Peace. Deuces.